Welcome to Physiology Bites, everyone. My name is Ben, and today we're going to be talking about what happens during pulmonary ventilation. Okay, first off, what is pulmonary ventilation? Take a big breath in for me and a big breath out. You just did pulmonary ventilation. It's the act of air moving in and out of the lungs. But why does it do that? That's the important question. So to tackle that, we're first going to talk about inspiration. So inspiration is when air enters the lungs. And the reason this happens is that if you put your hand on kind of the top of your chest, or your, I'm going to be using the term thoracic cavity today to cover that entire area of your rib cage area. If you put your hand on your thoracic cavity and just take a big breath in and a big breath out, you'll feel the thoracic cavity expands and constricts depending on whether you're breathing in and out. And this is key to the mechanisms I'll be talking about today of why pulmonary ventilation occurs. So when we breathe in air, inspiration, what happens is the muscles of inspiration, the main key one being the diaphragm, contract. Now, when the diaphragm contracts, okay, it's kind of shaped like this and it lines the bottom of your rib cage. When the diaphragm contracts, it actually moves lower. And I'll show you what that looks like. When it moves lower, what it does is it increases the amount of volume in the thoracic cavity. The lungs track the movement of the thoracic cavity. So by changing the dimensions of the thoracic cavity, we change the volumes of the lungs. So this is the reason our lung volume increases. Now, when the lung volume increases, it actually causes a decrease of pressure inside of the lungs. Okay, and this is due to something called Boyle's law. All right. And this simply states that when you increase the volume of a given, it can be anything, doesn't have to be a lung. Okay. The pressure inside will decrease. So when we breathe in, our diaphragm contracts, it expands our thoracic cavity, which causes our lungs to expand. When the lungs expand, they have more volume. And because of that, we get a drop in pressure. What we've done by doing that is we've created a pressure gradient, which means that we now have lower pressure in the lungs than we do in the air that we breathe. And what happens with gradients, whether it be a pressure gradient or whatever it may be, is they love moving from area of high to low. So because we've now changed our lung volume and decreased the pressure, okay, what that means is the pressure inside the lungs, so this hand has dropped, and is now lower than the pressure in the atmosphere. And this causes air to move into your lungs until these two equilibrate, all right, which is what happens when you finish your breath in. So air comes in because we decrease the pressure, all right, and we're able to change that pressure by increasing the volume. Expiration is the exact opposite. Those inspiratory muscles now relax. So the diaphragm relaxes and moves more back up into your rib cage, like so. And in the process of doing this, because the lungs track the thoracic cavity, the lungs also contract somewhat, meaning that they have less volume in the thoracic cavity and the lungs. Remember what we talked about before. If there's less volume in the lungs, pressure is going to do the opposite. So with less lung volume, there's now going to be more pressure inside the lungs. And now we've flipped that gradient the other way. Now the pressure is higher in the lungs than it is the atmosphere. So air will move out of the lungs. And that's what happens when you breathe out. Okay, you can feel your breath when you breathe out. It's because your thoracic cavity is constricting. This hikes up the pressure and causes air to drive out and causes air to leave your lungs. All right. And so it's all because of changes in pressure. And we cause that change in pressure by changing our lung volume. Now, throughout this whole time, I've been talking about how the lungs move with the thoracic cavity. And that's because around the lungs, there's a structure called the pleura. Whenever the thoracic cavity moves, whether it be the diaphragm or the rib cage, it will pull the pleura, and the pleura will pull the lungs. So that's how we breathe in and out. All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.